This is Horror Podcast.
Welcome to This is Horror, a podcast for readers, writers, and creators. I'm Michael David Wilson, and every episode, alongside my co-host Bob Pastorella, we chat with the world's best writers and creatives about writing, life lessons, creativity, and much more. And today is the start of a new era, because this year marks 500 episodes and 10 years of This is Horror Podcast. And this is going to be our most successful year yet. We are reaching out to dream guests to deliver a year-long celebration of epic proportions. And we kick off 2023 with an incredible guest. You see, today we are talking to David J. Schow. Not only is he the founder of Splatterpunk, but he is the screenwriter of 90s goth classic The Crow, and he penned one of my favourite short story collections, Seeing Red. Now, long-term listeners to This is Horror may remember that Bob and I spoke at length about the final tale in Seeing Red, Not From Around Here, on our Patreon podcast, Story Unboxed. And if you want to listen to that, and I certainly suggest you do, you can access it at patreon.com/thisishorror. But we are not here to talk about Patreon. Oh no, we are here to talk about David J. Schow's journey and evolution as a writer. And in this conversation, of course, as we often do, we talk about early life lessons. So what is it that David learnt growing up? And then we also discuss Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre III, with that infamous, gloriously over-the-top trailer. And we also get into Twilight Zone Magazine and how David caused T.E.D. Klein to break almost all of his rules. So we are minutes away from all of that and a multitude of other things. But before any of that, it is time for an advert break.
Hey everyone, this is author Jeff Strand, and I cannot wait to see you at Horror on Main. Remember, attendance is mandatory. Don't make me hunt you down.
Horror on Main, a new weekend convention for the horror community. We explore all the shadows within horror entertainment. From idea to product, there are many people behind the scenes, and we're bringing them to you, as well as contests, movies, panels, podcasters, and much, much more. We've been going to conventions for over 20 years and are changing up the little things to make the big picture amazing. Join us Memorial Day weekend 2023 in Hunt Valley, Maryland. Come to the block party and meet your new neighbors. See HorrorOnMain.com for details.
Cosmovorous, the debut cosmic horror novel from R.C. Housen. Esmeralda has lived on the fringes of society for as long as she can remember, until a Halloween night gone wrong unlocks a cache of nightmarish memories. Visions of a bizarre desert town, images of a mysterious woman, the pain of an ultimate betrayal, and the shame of a bargain made in blood. Now she must travel back and learn the true nature of the ravenous cosmos. Cosmovorous, available everywhere books are sold.
Okay, with that said, here it is. It is the legendary David J. Schow on This is Horror. David, welcome to This is Horror.
And it is now.
Oh, there you go. So I thought to begin with, let's talk about some of the early life lessons that you learned growing up. So my understanding is that you were a military kid and you moved around a lot. So I'm wondering what kind of lessons you learned in those formative years.
Well, I didn't move around a lot because I was a military kid. My dad was in the military. We didn't start moving all over the country until he retired. from the Air Force. We moved essentially from Middlesex to Fort Worth, believe it or not, to Kentucky, to Minnesota, to Arizona, to Huntington Beach, all over the place. And I think what you're getting at there is that I've told parts of this story before. It's like I did not go to the same school with the same class of people from the time I was in the 3rd grade to the time I was a junior in high school. So we were all over the joint. That means you do not have a group of friends. You have to be fairly self-reliant. And as we discovered, my brothers and I discovered, and none of us are related, by the way, because I'm adopted. So you have to not only become self-reliant, but you have to entertain yourself when nobody else will. That means books are terrific, especially if you're as old as I am, as ancient as I am right now. So it's a self-reliance. It's a self-reliance lesson, basically. Also, let me add that I never wanted to do anything seriously other than write for a living. It struck me at a very early age that this was perhaps a very good thing to be doing, or at least a kind of a respectable thing. I didn't know all the kind of like the waiting and the privation and everything that would entail, but I stuck it out. And weirdly enough, unlike a lot of people that I know in the current writing environment, right? Writing is the only way I have ever made my living.
Yeah, so how old were you when this notion struck you that you wanted to be a writer? And was there a pivotal moment or an experience that you remember and it's like, aha, this is what I want to do?
I was fairly little when the idea of it was the idea of making shit up for a living. And that struck me as being kind of pretty respectable. So I got a hold of one of a series of typewriters. I was flunking out of school at the time, so I started typing all my school papers. By typing all of your school papers, you can impress the teachers that you had not previously impressed. And then I learned certain tricks about surviving public school that had mystified me before, such as you only really need to know one thing to get through public school, and that is the ability to pass tests. Once you get that little golden clue, it was a fairly easy surf through, where I had been fucking off all through school and flunking out. But then, I hit a turning point, began typing papers, began working on the school paper. Even then, I was writing stories when I was 5 years old. I wrote a sequel to a Creature from the Black Lagoon movie in a spiral notebook when I was in 3rd grade. Boy, I wish I still had that, but I don't. And as a result of this, I got to the point where I took the SATs in America, the college tests, right? And through some miracle, I aced the English section of the ACT. It was a complete accident. I was just, it's like when you're presented with a lot of multiple choice questions, you try to do the most intelligent guess, right? Well, I aced the English section, so they started throwing minor scholarships at me. One of the places that offered me a scholarship was the University of Iowa, which I was too stupid to know was a major writing school.
Right.
At the time, I didn't, I went with the school that offered me the most money, so I could get an apartment, And having done that, I floundered around in college for about 3 semesters. But at that point, it had just occurred to me to try to sell stories to magazines. We used to have these things, Michael and Bob, you may know, we used to have these things a long time ago called magazines. They were these paper things. And they had words in them, and you read them. Yeah, it was like yeah, it's like cave drawings, at this point. But there were markets for science fiction stories, suspense stories, Ellery Queen type stories, mystery and horror stories. Not so much horror, but they were out there. Markets were out there. And I started writing what I thought they would buy and sending it to them, getting it constantly rejected until it was really a publisher perish kind of thing. I had no fallback. I had no first bank of mom and dad. You know what I mean? It was just like, well, you're either going to publish something or you're going to die. And then some fool at a newspaper sent me a check for an article that I had written, and then I was off down the slide. I was irreclaimable after that point. I didn't realize I was living in the middle of the desert. Bob could probably relate to this, living in Texas, right? It's very hot in the desert. It's very hot where I am right now. And so I thought I would write an amusing article about people spending too much time in the sun in the desert, especially those people that would sit in those mesh recliners and bake until they look like beef jerky, basically. And I sent it to the paper, and they bought it immediately. And I couldn't figure out why, except, wow, is my sense of humor that great? No, it was like, it's because if I send the local paper, the weekend section of the local paper, an article about people suntanning, that permits them to go to the University of Arizona and run a 4-page spread of women in bathing suits. So it's a win-win.
You're right.
So after that, it was within 6 months of this epiphany that I sold the first fiction that I ever sold. I sold it to the first place I submitted it to, and they sent me a letter back, because this is all learned by doing stuff. And they editor of a magazine named called Galileo sent it back to me, saying, "We love your story. We want to buy it." The words every wannabe writer wants to hear. Then comes the part that you're not ready for, where they go, "Now, if you can very, very carefully cut about 4,000 words out of this." I go, oh. And I did, and they did, and that was so you figure a lot of beginning writers, wannabe writers, they talk about breaking in. Breaking in is very important. Breaking in sounds a lot like burglary, because it is. Breaking and entering, actually. So you figure, okay, I made my first sale, I'm in. It was 4 years before anybody bought anything else at that point. And I didn't know about ramen then. So
but
I got to
it
California
now.
and everybody was going, "Oh, ramen's cheap. I had no idea. I was a Kraft macaroni and cheese guy.
Right. So just to kind of place when this happened, so how old are you at this point where you make the first sale, and what else are you doing? Like, are you still in school at that point? Is it beyond school? What's going on?
Yes, I was in my early 20s, and I was at university still, and I was picking up spare change by doing things like running film festivals that you sold memberships to.
Right.
And I thought, wow, I would rather, Bob will know what this is like. It's like, I thought, wow, I could make a living running conventions. And it's sort of true, and it's sort of not true. It depends on how you walk that tightrope. Now, during this period of time, I had 3 other jobs that weren't really jobs, partially because I got fired from all 3. And 2 of them, to my mind, don't count because they were writing related. One was working in a bookstore. Actually, 2 bookstores, a used bookstore and a new bookstore, so 2 separate things. And the other one was working on the staff of a magazine in Chicago for 6 months. They were all instructive. They paid the bill, but underneath all of this was constantly, I don't want to be an employee at a magazine. I want to be generating my own material and writing. So that's what was going on at this period of time.
Yeah.
And I was fired. And the third job stop me if you've heard this one. The third job was a phone soliciting job that I had for a day and a half before I got fired.
Now,
I couldn't stand it. It was so soul destroying. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I thought I would rather starve to death trying to sell stories to magazines, and very nearly did, a couple of times. But the cost of living was low at that point, and I had a very forgiving landlady.
Yeah, thank goodness. And yeah, telesales, it's got to be up there with the absolute worst soul-destroying jobs one can have.
Well, it's you that's like breaking and entering too. You come into people's house uninvited and you try to convince them to buy shit they don't want.
Yeah.
And you can spiel on the phone with the best of them, but who the hell wants to do that for a living? How much pride do you have? Well, in my case, a lot, and I couldn't do it for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did it for years.
You did it for years, Bob.
I did it for years. I worked for an insurance agent, did it for years, but we got smart. You can't control a phone call when you're the one calling. So we would leave messages and have the customers call us back. Because psychologically, if someone calls you, that person's not going to hang up on you.
Yeah, they initiated the call then. Yeah. Makes perfect sense.
Then in other words, we honed it down to a great message. I did it for 5 years, make good money, but it is soul sucking job. And I gladly went back to selling cars. It was one of those things. It's like, I'm going to go back. At least that's
a mercantile exchange, right? It's just sort of like, you want it? It costs this much. Let's talk.
And now I'm in the phone business selling, parasitic devices to unsuspecting kids. Yeah.
Little aliens that came down from space, fused onto their hands and won't let go. You have to do everything that they want, including buy all those updates, or they will punish you. These little alien devices.
That's right.
Because you guys look like you might have lived during the before times a little bit, before the digital alien invasion, right?
Right. Yeah.
You probably experienced a rotary phone once or twice in your life.
Yes. Magazines had tons of them. One time I was subscribed to like 5 or 6 writing magazines. My mom's like, where are you going to put all that stuff? I'm like, I don't know. I should have kept them. We ended up throwing them out.
I did keep them. It was like I had crates full of every magazine that I had ever bought filed, because all of that shit to my brain was reference material.
Yeah.
Did you go through a phase where you bought Writer's Market?
Yes.
Do you remember Writer's Market?
You remember that, Michael?
Do you even know what Writer's Market is? Writer's Market was a huge book they would publish once a year that was up to date for every place you could possibly send something.
Massive.
Yeah, it was like a phone book. Now we have to explain what a phone book is. Okay. We're becoming trapped.
It sounds similar to the Writers and Artists Yearbook, but is this the same thing, or is that like a slightly different version of it?
I assume it's amazingly similar. But basically, it was a yearly updated catalog of every conceivable market where you could send something according to what topic area you were writing in.
Yeah, that's exactly what Writers and Artists Yearbook is. Maybe that's the UK name for the Writers Market. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Where did you grow up in the UK, Michael?
So I grew up in the Midlands, so in the Birmingham area, famous for things such as Black Sabbath and Napalm Death for grindcore fans. Yeah, loads of fucking good metal bands out of the Midlands.
Do you know Gavin Badley?
I don't know.
He wrote several infamous books on black metal and gothic music and the goth fashion and all that stuff for England. I just wondered if you'd ever read any of his books.
No, I haven't, but I mean, just based on that, it definitely sounds like the kind of thing that I'd be interested in. In terms of text on black metal specifically, the one that springs to mind is Lords of Chaos, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, Birmingham is a great metal city. I mean, I actually, the town that my parents live in, a little village called Bewdley, Robert Plant lives there. So just periodically, I just see him
right now.
Yeah, just walking around. Yeah, I don't know what more to say about that. We could spend a hell of a lot of time talking about metal, and I mean it's obvious, even from the soundtrack for The Crow, that is exactly the kind of thing that you're into. And actually, in preparation for this podcast, I did rewatch The Crow only yesterday, and it fucking stands up, man. It's a very cool movie. I mean, essentially about a goth going around and killing all the motherfuckers who wronged him. What is not to...
You've probably seen it more times than I have.
Well, probably, yeah. I mean,
we'll circle back to that.
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, since I've touched on movies there, I mean, when you decided that you wanted to be a writer, did you have aspirations more to write for the screen, for the page? Was that important? Or was really what was important was you were making shit up and entertaining people? It didn't matter what medium.
Well, yes to the back part of that question, but there's a condition to that, which was I never set out to be a screenwriter or a scenarist. Basically, what I assumed would happen was that if I published enough books, somebody would be interested in one of those books to adapt into a movie or something, and might find my way in that way. That's not how it happened at all. I tell people, frequently when you do conferences, when you do workshops and stuff like that, people always want to know if you have advice on how to do this. And I say, listen, here's my advice. Because basically I'm nobody's daddy, I'm nobody's mentor, and I'm nobody's teacher. There are plenty of teachers out there for those who want them. However, if you want to try doing this the way that I did it, I didn't plan it this way, mind you, it just happened this way. But I wrote and published short stories for a decade, and somebody at a movie studio was a fan of them and called me up and said, hey, do you want to write a Nightmare on Elm Street film? Okay, I'll go in and talk about doing that. And this is when the Nightmare on Elm Street films were deep into the bad sequels, as we call them. And I had a treatment. I presented them with a treatment, and they said, that's terrific. We want to hire you to write our movie. I said, that's great. What do we do? Tell me what to do next. Well, and forgive me if you've heard parts of this because I have told this story before. Go across the hall and give them your social security number. Oh, and there's one more thing. We need to see a script you have written. And I was the only schmuck in Hollywood without a script in his back pocket because I never expected to be called in. So I did not get the job. And the irony of that is that there was no proof that I could write a screenplay. And on the day that on the day I delivered the first draft of that television episode, they looked at it and they said, okay. And within 24 hours, they hired me to write a Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequel. So the first TV show that I ever wrote and the first feature that I ever wrote, not only both got bought, but both got made. Yeah. Now, if you want to, for those of you who want to follow along in my footsteps, if you want to write fiction for 10 years, hoping somebody calls you up on the phone, we might get some good stories out of the deal. Yeah. And I mean, what? 2 massive franchises as well to be involved in for your first crazy. 2 films. And I've written for Freddy, I've written for Leatherface, I've written for Jason, I've written for Critters. Good work if you can get it.
Yeah. Well, my understanding with Critters specifically was that one of your motivations was to just show that you were capable of writing a PG film.
Absolutely, yeah. Because I remember it wasn't even a meeting. It was us hanging around in an office at New Line, and somebody said, "How about David to do this?" And another guy behind the desk goes, he wouldn't even bother with that. He wouldn't be interested in it. Besides, I don't think he could write a PG-13 film. And I went, really? Yeah, throw the gauntlet down.
Yeah.
So I wrote two of them.
Nice.
And they turned out to be Leonardo DiCaprio's first feature film.
Yeah.
Critters 3. And in Critters 4, we had Angela Bassett and Brad Dourif.
There you go.
And they were fun. They were cheap movies. We shot them in an abandoned supermarket on Pico Boulevard. That's where we built all the sets. And it was fun. It was one of the easiest gigs I'd ever gotten in my life.
Yeah. And I want to immediately jump back to Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre III.
Take them in whatever order you like.
Yeah, I mean, this whole conversation is going to jump all over the place, but I mean, at that point...
That's my fault.
well,
that's my fault. I jump all over the place.
Yeah. But I mean...
If we can just keep Bob awake.
Yeah.
It's like,
I'm
doing good.
I'm fine.
Okay, that's good to hear.
I'm fine.
Man. Yeah, and I mean, obviously at this point, there's only been 2 other Texas Chainsaw Massacres, not like now where we have so many of them, but you've got the iconic harrowing original and then a very tongue-in-cheek comedic slapstick in the second. So, I mean, what did you set out to do with the third, and what, if any, direction were you given in terms of tonally what they were looking for with the film?
Well, very clearly, if you've seen the third movie, very clearly they wanted to take a property like Leatherface and make him into a franchise like Freddy. Yeah. The very first scene in the movie is of him putting the mask together the same way Freddy is putting the glove together in the first Nightmare on Elm Street film. Apart from that, it was just make it sequel worthy was the only mandate, really. And so I was already, and this is really ironic and funny when you think about where horror movies went after this. Specifically, they went to this place, and you'll all know these sequels, right? All the sequels, everybody had a fucked up childhood. Everybody is related to everybody else in the franchise by blood. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I hated both of those ideas. So I thought, why don't we wipe the slate, and I'll give Leatherface an adopted family that is not related in any way except that they're all psychopaths. And that made writing that movie fun. We came up with what we called the Excalibur chainsaw. And then somebody said, Excalibur chainsaw? Now, you guys have probably seen the trailer to Leatherface, right?
It's absolutely
it's one of the most
ridiculous.
Famous trailers in horror movie history.
Yeah.
And literally, it's just stuff sitting around the office going, well, it should look like the trailer to Excalibur.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like, done. And, you know, it had a couple of production problems. We were remember, I got this job by writing the TV show script, right? We shot that episode of the TV show, and then we had to start cutting it because it had too much sexual stuff in it.
Right.
We had to cut 8 minutes out of a 1-hour show and then find something to replace it with for no budget with 2 days to shoot, right? So we're sitting there trying to make up stuff. Similarly, Leatherface, where we had the TV show that was chopped to pieces for being too sexy, and the Chainsaw movie that was chopped to pieces because we had to go back to the ratings board 11 times. And during the 11 times that we had to go back to the ratings board, we lost all of our advertising.
Yeah.
We were advertising the movie to open in November, and the MPAA kept saying, no, 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 and we missed our opening date. So now all the ad money is spent. So when the movie finally does come out in January of the following year, there's no ad budget. And out of the top 10 movies that came out that week, we were number 11.
Yeah.
So flash forward to a couple of years ago, I was down in Hollywood, and they had there was a venue called the Silent Movie Theater, and they hosted an event called Cinefamily. Cinefamily went down in disgrace due to sexual scandals among the employees. But before they did, they would use the Silent Movie Theater to have midnight showings of things. We did Sleepwalkers there, and we did Psycho 2 there, you know, and we did Leatherface there a couple of years ago. I went down, Billy Butler went down, Ken Foray was there, and we spoke, you know, a little bit before. And I said, you know, it's like we were a full house for the screening at midnight on a weekday. We were a full house. Everybody was there to see our chopped up version of the movie. And I said, you know, we made the worst Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequel ever made until they made another one.
Yeah.
And then we just got better and better and better in memory, right?
Yeah.
But RA, you know, everybody on the cast is my friend. I still see Ken. I still see Billy Butler. I still see RA to this day. We get along better now than we were when we were making the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. And Ken is, of course, an absolute legend of the horror genre, who I feel...
Well, he's a joy. He's a joy. Tony Todd's a joy. Tony was in The Crow.
Yeah, yeah.
And Billy's pretty wacky. What's interesting was that Kate Hodge, who is in Leatherface, who like a lot of women who are in franchise horror movies, who are like, it's like, I really don't want that on my resume. This has happened with a lot of my female stars.
Right.
So it's really not on my resume. She even came around after a long period of time. She started doing autograph shows and stuff. And so, you know, now if we all get together, it's pretty much a whole reunion.
Yeah.
The only person we lost was Miriam Byrd Nethery, who was Clu Gulager's wife, who played Grandma. Or the mom, I forget which, the woman in the wheelchair.
Right.
And but you know, Jennifer Banco was the horrible little blonde child. She's on Facebook.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Are you talking about Facebook? Are you still off Facebook? I heard about your permanent. So it is a permanent ban. Then there is no coming back.
Yes, my girl suggested that we just start over with another identity.
Yeah.
Because a year ago, at this time, I was selling quite a lot of books.
Yeah.
Via Facebook links. You know, I mean, like a couple of $1,000s a month worth of books just out of my own stock. And I never sold a single book off Twitter. And so, I wouldn't mind being back on, but Facebook changed in the last during the you know, we have before COVID and after COVID basically, and a lot of things mutated. And now, you know, I got Facebook right now. Correct me if I'm wrong in this impression, but it seems like an endless AA meeting.
Well, Bob would have to comment on that, because I actually came off Facebook in 2020 myself. I just felt that like the value of it was vastly disappearing. So now,
well, I got tired of looking at cat pictures and food pictures.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
The AA aspect of it was it's just all of these people doing all of these posts where it's like, well, we're really not so bad, and it's really kind of depressing to be alive, and aren't we great, and yay, and you know, and it's like it seemed to be that too. Maybe I'm just making it up.
It's like that, because I went back there probably about 2 months ago, because there's some photos that I have in my gallery there that aren't on my phone. So I wanted to save those photos to my computer. And so I went and I did that. And then I said, well, let me just check the feed. And I noped myself right the fuck out of there because it was just, it's a fucking nightmare, you know? And so, and I'm like, no, and this is at the point where I was like, oh yeah, Twitter's much better than this, you know? And now Twitter's kind of like, I don't know.
Just wait.
It's getting fucked up. I don't know what it could be. It's like one person. If you had to narrow it down to one person, then yeah, we could narrow it down to one person.
I don't think Twitter's as bad as people are making it out to be. I think there's a lot of a panic at the moment over...
Listen, folks, Twitter ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, I agree. It's just I don't know. I've noticed some glitchiness that other people were talking about, that I was like, going, nah, they're full of it, you know. And I've noticed it on my end. So I'm like, okay,
I can never wire my brain behind Instagram though and stuff like that. So maybe I'm already too old for this.
Yeah, we have an Instagram for This Is Horror, but I don't really notice much kind of conversion or benefit from it. I just periodically put some photos of, you know, who's been on the podcast.
I was on Twitter because I was waiting for Twitter to replace Facebook, and now I need whatever else is going to replace it in the future, because it does seem like Rome is burning, you know, in many ways. It's like these are going to come crashing down, and we're going to have to find some way just so we can, you know, like stay in touch with each other.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I think whatever replaces Twitter, it won't be a Twitter clone. So that's why all of these weird Twitter clones like Hive and Mastodon and whatever the fuck else, it's not going to be like that. It will be something that is completely different. And I'm sure whatever will ultimately replace it doesn't even exist yet. You know, it's got to be innovative, it's got to be easy to use, and it's got to be compulsive. There's got to be a reason to go for it. But I mean, if you look at any social network that has disappeared, like, I mean, for example, take MySpace, it didn't just happen one day. It happens gradually, and it happens when there's a better product out there, which right now, I don't think there is anything doing what Twitter is doing better. So we'll wait and see. But I reckon it's got at least another 3, 4, maybe even 5 years in it. So don't delete your Twitter accounts yet.
No, I'm looking forward to exactly what you described happening.
Yeah.
It's like we can't predict the form it's going to take because you couldn't predict the form it took last time.
Yeah.
Right.
Although I'll tell you guys, I am noticing there is a minor surge, not culture changing or anything like that, but there is a minor surge back to like live journals and blogs, just so you can be a member of something and get somebody's personal point of view that goes on for longer than 2 sentences.
Yeah, I think to a point, I think there is definitely more interest in that, and there are a number of communities that have their own Discord channel or their own Slack channel, which is I mean, it's essentially a modernized forum. And of course, in the horror community, we'd be remiss to not mention Brian Keene's forum, which he created a number of months ago. But
which I have a page on.
There you go. Yeah. So if you want to ask David a question, you can head over to Keene's forum. I think it's called the
great
Kingdom.
Thing about the great thing about Keene's thing is that it's really easy.
Right.
Just get in, and that's part of the whole battle right there.
Yeah.
Because people don't want to go through what we all just went through for the last hour trying to get on Skype.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
I also want you to let me know if I am not answering your questions adequately. Let me know.
Hey, this is all good, and I mean, as listeners know, with these This Is Horror conversations, I mean, it's very much a conversation rather than an interview in the traditional sense.
I prefer that.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems to be a better way to take advantage of this medium. If you just want question, answer, then fucking read a print interview.
We could read it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, that's why I want to know I don't want to know where you guys are and what you're doing.
Yeah, that's it. But I think with social media, I mean, there are obviously a multitude of functions, and particularly for the writer and the creative, then yes, we do have this function of wanting to connect with people, particularly with our friends and people within the community. But then there is also a selling and a marketing aspect of social media, even if some people don't want to admit it. Of course there fucking is. That's one of the things that it's all about. And so,
well, one of the things you get asked most often, if you're lucky, on social media is people come to you and they say, I need to know how to get your books.
Yeah.
There's it's not simple enough out there.
Right.
And I had a very good system going on Facebook where it's like, you DM me, here it is for a price. Now, last year and this year, I undertook with a friend of mine who runs a publishing company called Cimarron Street.
Right.
To republish all of my short story collections, because I wanted a uniform edition that would line up on a shelf and all the spines would match. You can see them right behind me. They're right over there. They're right over there.
Yeah.
And we did 11 books in a year and a half. We started right at the beginning of COVID, and we did 11 books in a year and a half, and it was fun because I could remix and rearrange all my collections, add new stuff that was unique to each book, so people who had the old book would have a reason to buy the new book, and do these huge afterwards that are kind of autobiographical, especially if you read them in sequence.
Right.
Because I got an excuse. I also write a column, like I used to write a column for Fangoria magazine.
Yeah.
Called Raving and Drooling.
Yes.
Well, I resurrected that column for Bare Bones magazine, which is published by Cimarron Street. I just turned in my 13th column for them.
Oh, right.
And one of the columns that I got to do was I got to call up all my old cohorts from Twilight Zone Magazine and say, reminisce with me about this for a little bit. And everybody from the managing editors people hadn't heard of, like Bob Sabat and Stoney Emshwiller and Steve King and Joe Lansdale and Pat Cadigan, and all of these other people all answered me. And so that was really a golden age, and that was the last great national magazine market for horror stories, except in England, because you had all of those, you had the Dark Side and Fear, and I got all of those magazines in the mail. Yeah, and in fact, the latest issue of Phantasmagoria.
Yes.
Is devoted to Fantasy Tales, one of the oldest British horror magazines. They basically took over from the Pan Book of Horror Stories. And I was in some early issues of Fantasy Tales because, yes, I really am that old. So I got to reminisce about that a little bit. Yeah, we got to go on and on about Twilight Zone. I got to call up Ted Klein and bug him for the first time. I hadn't spoken to him for 20 years.
Yeah.
It was, I hadn't heard of Twilight Zone. I never read it until I was at a bookstore and I seen this. I don't know if you can see it with the camera.
You're seeing red, yeah.
And I had no idea who you were. I seen this cover and it was an instant buy. I didn't even read the back. And after that, I read this in one sitting.
Oh man, thank you.
And it fucked me up in all the great ways, and I became a subscriber to Twilight Zone Magazine, which unfortunately soon after that kind of went away. So I think I got maybe a year and a half's worth of issues, and I don't have them. I lost them.
Seeing Red came out. Seeing Red came out in 1990. And Twilight Zone died in 1989. So it would have been pretty close.
Well,
yeah.
So this I know I ordered Twilight Zone. Well, I'm old. I may have gotten it before. But yeah, I could have sworn that I got that. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. Who knows? But still,
Tom Canty will be
this shit right here.
He'll be very happy to hear that you saw the cover and bought the book immediately, because Tom did the cover of that book, and he just did the cover of one of my reprinted collections for Cimarron Street, which was and except in addition to doing the cover, he also did like 20 illustrations for the interior. And the next book we're bringing out was Subterranean Press did it as a book called DJ Sturbia in 2016. Tom did the cover for that one too, and he did like 30 new illustrations for the interior. And we're working on another thing right now that I'm requiring him to do like 25 illustrations for. He cannot be stopped. The guy is a machine.
Yeah.
Tom is the guy who did all of those elaborate covers for the Ellen Datlow Year's Best Fantasy and Horror anthologies. All those wonderful Alphonse Mucha looking covers.
Yeah. And the thing that you and Tom are working on at the moment, is that Sweet 13, the short story collection?
No, I don't know who the artist for that is. It's coming out. This is something else that we haven't really even announced yet, that Cimarron Street is going to bring out. It'll be something along the lines of, if you saw Weird Doom.
Yeah.
It's something along those lines.
Yeah. And I love the origin story for Weird Doom, and I mean, I'm assuming that not everyone listening knows that, so I'd love you just to kind of repeat it for us, because it is a good one, and you kind of trolled a lot of people.
We were in the process of doing these reprints, and John Scolari, who runs Cimarron Street, called me up and he said, I want to do a sampler. Just as a kind of a inexpensive, cheap way to show these people, because we did so many books in 11 months. I said, let's take little samples from each one of them and put them together. And then gradually, I said, why don't we pretend like it's the missing issue of a pulp that never existed?
Yeah.
I said, well, what would that be called? And I said, it would be called Weird Doom, because I saw a pulp cover that had a story that was described as being, like, on the bottom of the cover, a compelling tale of weird doom.
Yeah.
I'm going, what is weird doom? If it's not a genre, it should be.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, let's invent it. Let's create it ourselves. And so I used a Bernie Wrightson painting that I have, an original, that had never been used in color before, as our cover illustration. Bernie was a friend of mine. I have a lot of Bernie paintings and drawings around. I met Dr. Hal.
Yeah.
Harry Robbins. He was an illustrator for our promotional material for one of the biggest conventions that you've never heard of.
Right.
Which it was actually the best genre convention in history, and nobody's ever heard of it. We may get around to it in a little bit, but anyway, that was back when I thought I could make money doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I called Harry up in San Francisco, where he lives now, and I said, can you do us a Virgil Finlay, Stephen Fabian, Hannes Bach style masthead for Weird Doom? And he did it in a weekend. And I said, good, can you do me another one? Yeah, do the editorials. Okay. I said, Hal, do you mind if I just go through your artwork and take whatever strikes my fancy that you've used already, and can I just pay you a fee to just reuse that artwork? And so we used like 20 pieces of Hal's in Weird Doom, and we had samples from all the things we were doing at Cimarron Street, different stories. One's a nonfiction piece, a column. Others are stories from the different collections, and then just to add a cherry onto the top of it, I put a new story in there that had not been published, called Caving, which has since been included in Paula Garan's Year's Best anthology. So good for that.
Yeah.
And you know, now the worst thing about it is resisting the temptation to do Weird Doom again.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like maybe we shouldn't resist it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I thought if time came around for a Cimarron Street Sampler Volume 2, you know, it would be, well, you know, now we have twice as many books as we did when we did the first one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it could happen. It could happen. But the new project that Tom Canty is illustrating is a little different. It's a little different. It's not like a fake magazine.
Right.
But we want to do other things like I love the whole subgenre of books and magazines and films that don't exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I talked to John. I said, I want to do a magazine called Three-Fisted Defective. So we'll see if that ever goes anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And Weird Doom, I think you said it was Weird Doom 23. So, of course, if you do another sampler, you can't just do 24. It has to be something like 27 or 29.
Well, the volume and issue numbers were so fucked up that nobody could figure it out.
Yeah, yeah.
We do like volume 26, number 17, or whole number 9.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And I mean, did you ever have any people kind of contacting you about Weird Doom, or you see people trying to track it down? It's like, well, we've got 23. Where the fuck are the other 22?
Well, no, but we did get people who were confused about the contents page because I filled it up with pseudonyms of mine.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like there's one credited to me, and then there's like 5 other things credited to different names that were all pen names that I used at one time or another, but a lot of people didn't get that going in.
Yeah.
And they're sort of like, who are these other people? I've never heard of them.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes, as Ellen Datlow said, sometimes you have to cut your readers a break.
Right. Right.
You know.
Yeah. And I mean, my understanding is that you caused the editor of Twilight Zone to break a lot of their own rules that they'd set out. So, I mean, you started using pseudonyms in Twilight Zone magazine so that there wasn't such a monopoly of David Schow content. Because I think not in one episode, in one issue, you had multiple stories, and you were also running an 8-parter on The Outer Limits.
That's because I didn't want to wait.
Yeah.
And not only that, Ted Klein is the guy. Bob will know because Bob read the foreword to Seeing Red. Bob will know that Ted broke a lot of Twilight Zone rules for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only reason he gives for doing that is he must have liked the stories.
Yeah.
And that's good. And when I had like an article and a story in the same issue, well, it just doesn't look good for any magazine, including one that was struggling along all the time, like Twilight Zone was most of the time, to depend, as Ted said, too openly on a small group of the same writers.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, you know, pseudonyms are a grand tradition. Let me just use some pen names.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, 30 years later, I'm reprinting those stories under my own name. So it's a win-win.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still, like, to this day, I'll tell you guys, to this day, it's still fun for people coming up and going, you know, I read this story a long time ago and I had no idea it was you, but I suspected.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, oh, that's
yeah.
You couldn't get a greater compliment than that. You know, it's like, really, they know your style in a field where everybody is just devoted to grinding out wordage per day like toothpaste. You know, it's like you recognize the style.
Yeah.
It's like you read a Ramsey Campbell story, you know Ramsey's style.
Oh yeah.
Holy cow!
Oh yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Nobody writes. Nobody writes like Peter Straub wrote.
Yeah.
This is true.
That is a unique signature, a unique imprimatur that is totally his.
Yeah.
Lansdale.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, frequently we talk about Lansdale, and in terms of his genre, it's like Joe Lansdale writes in the Joe Lansdale genre. That's what he
Essentially, yeah.
writes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 It scares me to know how long I've known Joe.
Right. Right.
I met Joe at a World Fantasy Con panel
Mm.
that he and I were both on.
Mm.
And sitting in the front row of the audience was Fritz Leiber. And
Oh
it's like,
wow.
this is kind of backwards.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it was the only time I ever got to meet Fritz in my life. And I said, Fritz, I just wanted to tell you that I wrote this story called Red Light, won the World Fantasy Award. I just wanted to let you know that I'm ripping you off. I'm ripping off your story, The Girl with the Hungry Eyes,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
thematically.
Mhm.
Except it's like The Girl with the Hungry Eyes told from the opposite end of the telescope.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Fritz was okay with it because Harlan had ripped him off too. Harlan
Yeah.
had written a story that was a complete ripoff of The Girl with the Hungry Eyes called Nedra at F5.6,
Right.
where
Right.
she was a literal vampire.
Mm. Yeah.
And so having all this history, Harlan Ellison and Fritz Leiber and my story, and we won a trophy. So they call me up to do an audio commentary for the Night Gallery episode, The Girl with the Hungry Eyes,
Yeah.
you know, based on Fritz's story.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you guys have watched what's been going on with supplements and special features on DVDs and Blu-rays these days, but they love to take a shovel and just pile extras onto DVDs because that's a selling point.
Mm.
People look at the back of the DVD
Right.
and they go, oh, the more crap it has on it, I'll buy the version with the most crap on it.
Right.
They're doing Night Gallery season 3. And here's The Girl with the Hungry Eyes, which is a half-hour TV show, okay, from the 3rd season. So they were half an hour Night Galleries. And they listed in the initial listing, they had, and it's going to have 3 commentaries. There is no way in the known universe that you could talk for 90 minutes about The Girl with the Hungry Eyes, 3 times its length, you know, because two of the guys doing one of the commentary tracks are the guys who wrote the Night Gallery book, the guys that we all have to steal from to do our commentaries, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in that case, it wound up just being 2 commentaries, the guys who wrote the book and me, and I got to tell the story of me and Fritz on the audio track, because Fritz Leiber is not covered very much in the book that's about Night Gallery.
Mm.
He wrote the very first episode there was, the Dead One. I think it's called The Dead One. It was the first episode of the series, and then The Girl with the Hungry Eyes. He wrote the source stories for both of those.
Yeah.
And so to get a chance to talk about him, because I think there are certain writers that should not go down unsung, you know, and Fritz was a favorite. Fritz was an influence, you know, and we all have them. We all have them. And so any chance I get to sing about Fritz or Ted Sturgeon or Harlan or Bob Block or anybody like that, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I have no shame.
And I know that over the years you've done a lot of audio commentaries and liner notes and all these kind of additional bits of commentary for various movies. I'm wondering though, with the rise of streaming, do you think that this art is going to kind of disappear, or do you think we're going to kind of diversify in some way to get these commentaries out in a different way? Because, I mean, if you go to something like Netflix or Shudder or one of the many, many streaming platforms, there aren't really these additional commentaries. You've just got the movie and that's it.
I think one of the exceptions is the Criterion Channel.
Right.
I think that they will let
I was going to bring that up.
I think that they will let you watch certain special features
Mm.
that they have. But, for me, it's just another argument for hard media as opposed to streaming.
Right. Yeah.
Because streaming is not curated nearly well enough to please me.
Mm.
But to your first point, I think that I think it's a shakeup period too, because the other thing that's happened, Michael, is that now today they're letting just anybody do a commentary that wants to. They don't necessarily have to know anything. They don't. They go mumble for the whole thing. Now it's like for me and Tom Weaver and Tim Lucas and Kim Newman, we write the shit out of our commentaries.
Yeah.
Because I believe, like the old radio rule, I believe dead air is death.
Yeah.
And you got to give the person listening to it a reason to show up, to listen to. And if you don't, you got to just at least be a little bit entertaining. Not give them a lecture on something. And so all of these things got to juggle together. And I think that once we've worn out the available library of stuff that everybody wants to see on streaming,
right,
even streaming outlets are going to have to try to find other ways to keep their viewers.
Yeah.
And offering limited access to commentaries or special features might be one of the ways that they could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it strikes me hearing you talk about this as well, that, I mean, before we were talking about social media and how recently people are looking at going back to blogs and things like LiveJournal and forums. And so I'm wondering if we're going to have that same kind of rebellion or just dissatisfaction with streaming, that people will go back to hard media because, as you say, it's not curated well enough and there are so many gaps and there are things that you want to consume. So why not just buy the Blu-ray or whatever that not only gives you the film that you want to see, but it gives you all these extra nuggets and insights into the movie?
Well, there was, when we did 2 Points, when Leatherface first came out on Laserdisc.
Yeah.
Okay, way back when. It had 2 commentary tracks. And one of them was just me and Greg Nicotero. The other one was Jeff Burr and 2 of the actors. I think it was R.A. and probably Billy Butler. And those tracks disappeared when Leatherface went to DVD. There's a commentary track, but it's those 2 tracks edited together on the DVD. And if you want the raw track where just Greg and me talking for an hour and 20 minutes, it's not available anywhere except on that Laserdisc.
Wow.
So
did not know
the stuff does get lost.
Yeah.
It's like in a world where everybody who sees stuff on the internet assume that everything they see on the internet, A, is for free forever, and B, automatically goes to some cloud heaven where it will be forever. Well, if you've ever seen your favorite website vanish into the ether, you know what bullshit that is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's up to us to curate our own stuff. Nobody's going to do it for us, and if they do it for us, they're going to do it wrong.
Thank you so much for listening to part 1 with David J. Schow on This Is Horror. Join us again next time for the second and final part, where we talk about David partying with the rock band Journey, how Splatterpunk was born, David's friendship with Robert Bloch, and much more. But if you would like to get that ahead of the crowd, if you would like to get every episode ahead of the crowd, then become our patron at patreon.com/thisishorror. Not only do you get early bird access to each and every episode, but you can submit questions to every writer that we chat to on This Is Horror. And speaking of writers, coming up in just a few days, we will be chatting with the legendary master of suspense, Dean Koontz. So if you have a question for Dean, please do submit it at patreon.com/thisishorror. Now, I have a feeling that 2023 is going to be a good year for me. I actually have a feeling that it's going to be a really good year for so many of us. Now, a lot of you know because you've been listening for a while, and I've either talked about this implicitly or particularly with Jonathan Jan's got a little bit more explicit, but I've had a pretty rough run of it in 2020, 21 and 22. But I feel that things are shifting, and I think 2023 is going to bring a lot of good things. I'm optimistic that after what is now 19 months apart, I will finally see my daughter. I have a feeling too that I'll be able to resolve my custody case and finally get a divorce after having been separated from my ex for 2 years now. But it's not just personally. You see, professionally, I've got a lot of good things going on with my writing. There are a lot of exciting projects in the background. So I reckon that you will see a brand new Michael David Wilson release in 2023. So if you like the girl in the video and they're watching, then get ready, because another book or two, oh, it is on its way, my friend. It is on its way. Now, I said at the start of the show that 2023 marks a new era of This Is Horror podcast, with 500 episodes and 10 years of the show. A show I started in 2013 with Dan Howarth and everyone's favourite reprobate, John Costello. But this, 2023, will be the best year yet. The calibre of guests and the quality of conversations, we're going to take it to the next level. But you know, there is an area where I feel I really dropped the ball, and that's the Patreon. I know, talking to Bob, he tells me that, you know, I didn't drop the ball. Life circumstances happened. Plus, there was, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. But, you know, when I separated from my ex and then found myself away from my daughter, you know, going into that, at the end of 2020, we had over 200 patrons, but right now we have just under 150. And as my life descended into chaos, so did the output of Patreon and also the output of This Is Horror podcast episodes. And I feel bad about that. But I'm doing all that I can to bring things back to the level that they were in 2020. And of course, beyond, taking it further. So the Writers Forum on Discord is growing. It is more vibrant. We're having more amazing conversations there. I appreciate all of the patrons, and, you know, I love having those conversations on Discord. So please, if you are a patron and you've not joined the Discord community, sign up for it. If you're not sure how to, drop me an email, michael@thisishorror.co.uk. I'll set you up. But we're also going to be taking Story Unboxed to the next level. Not only are we going to put out a new episode every single month, but we'll be having a movie and book club in which we all discuss the text or film that we're analysing for that month. And on the Story Unboxed episode itself, there will be patrons that are joining us, that are guesting on those episodes. So if that sounds fun, that is another reason to become a patron. We're also going to be implementing more video footage into This Is Horror podcast, specifically on our YouTube channel and TikTok. So if that is something that you're into, please join us there. We are This Is Horror podcast on TikTok, and we are This Horror on YouTube. Now, all that is to say, me and Bob, we love you all so much, and if you want to support us, and help us reach our Patreon goals, let's take it to 200, let's smash 200, let's take it beyond 200, then please join us at patreon.com/thisishorror. Okay, friends, before I wrap up, it is time for an advert break.
Cosmovorous, the debut cosmic horror novel from R.C. Housing. Esmeralda has lived on the fringes of society for as long as she can remember, until a Halloween night gone wrong unlocks a cache of nightmarish memories. Visions of a bizarre desert town, images of a mysterious woman, the pain of an ultimate betrayal, and the shame of a bargain made in blood. Now she must travel back and learn the true nature of the ravenous cosmos. Cosmovorous, available everywhere books are sold.
Horror on Main, a new weekend convention for the horror community. Exploring all the shadows of horror, our guests include writers and actors, but also artists, publishers, directors, composers, and more. We've been going to cons for over 20 years and are changing up the little things to make the big picture amazing. Beyond guests, contests, movies, panels, and podcasters, our layout and programming are designed to further incorporate the very idea of community. Join us Memorial Day weekend 2023 in Hunt Valley, Maryland. Come to the block party and meet your new neighbors. HorrorOnMain.com.
Well, that almost does it for this episode. But I would like to wrap up with a quote from legendary Dean Koontz, a future guest on This Is Horror. So here we go. I really believe that everyone has a talent, ability, or skill that he can mine to support himself and to succeed in life. I will see you in the next episode for the final part with David J. Schow. But until then, take care of yourselves, be good to one another, read horror, keep on writing, and have a great, great day.
This is Horror Podcast.